So this is Flora, a statue made by Rory Macbeth. When he started exhibiting the sculpture in the city centers, it was plagued by men who constantly groped and molested it. Now, he happened to be present when some of the men were groping and molesting his statue, and when he called them out, they apologized. And they said, "I'm sorry, I thought it was real."
Alright, let's talk about something that's a little bit weird, something that should definitely not be a thing, but somehow is. Men groping statues.
Don't you just love modern society?
Now, you might have seen photos or videos about this online. You might have seen people posting with statues of women grabbing their chests or thighs like it's some kind of a joke. You might have also seen photos of statues where there's discoloration around certain areas due to the constant touching of them, particularly the breasts. And sure, it might seem like another dumb internet trend that is quite harmless, but I believe there's actually a lot more going on here. Some would argue that this isn't just about statues, it's about the way that we see women, it's about power, about culture, and about the kind of behaviour that society excuses. A perfect example, the case of the Flora statue in Italy. I came across this video on my Facebook timeline, because yes, I still use Facebook, I'm old, where the woman says that when these men were caught groping women, their defence was, well, I thought she was a real woman.
Let's think about that for a second.
Their excuse for touching her without consent was that they thought she was alive, meaning that in their minds, groping a real woman would have been normal or justifiable. That's disturbing. So today we're going to break down this phenomenon using different theories such as feminism, psychoanalysis, and social learning theory so that we can understand why this is happening and why it actually matters. Let's start with the basics. What do statues represent? Anybody? Gold star for the class? Well, they're not just lumps of stone, they do hold meaning. Public statues serve as cultural artifacts, often representing historical or mythical figures. And if you look at statues of women, you will notice a pattern. Many statues of women depict idealised, passive, and often sexualised forms, reinforcing traditional gender norms. Berger, in Ways of Seeing, talks about how women in art have historically been depicted for male gaze. Basically, for men to look at and enjoy rather than autonomous subjects. The act of groping statues extends this tradition, treating these figures not as cultural symbols but as objects for male amusement. Andrea Dworkin similarly argues in Pornography, Men Possessing Women, that the way that women are portrayed in media and public spaces teaches men to see them as objects rather than as people. In this sense, the groping of statues is not just an act of vandalism, but a public assertion of dominance over the female form. And this brings us back to Flora. The fact that men said, "I thought she was real," tells us something important. The expectation that women's bodies are available for public touch is so ingrained that they didn't even question their own actions. So when a guy gropes a statue, he's not just touching a piece of stone. He's acting out a behaviour that may have been ingrained in him, this idea that women's bodies exist for men's entertainment. And this connects to something called symbolic violence, a concept from Bourdieu. Symbolic violence isn't physical, but it's just as powerful. It's the small, everyday ways society reinforces hierarchies, like the idea that women's bodies are public property. According to this theory then, groping statues of women mimics real-world sexual harassment, reinforcing male entitlement to the female body. I also just want to highlight, when I say men in this video, I am referring to the men that are obviously groping statues. It seems a bit stupid that I have to point it out, but if you are not a man that gropes statues, then obviously when I say men about in this concept, I'm not talking about you.
Okay.
But let's get psychoanalytical for a moment, because when you think about it, groping a statue is weird. You know, it's not a living person, it's not reacting, so what's going on? What is the purpose of it? Psychoanalysis may offer additional insight into why men might engage in this behaviour. Freud, because of course, Freud would probably call this fetishism. Men who grope statues may be transferring sexual desire onto inanimate objects that often resist or reject them. In 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, Freud talks about how people sometimes transfer desires onto objects because they're safer, less complicated, or more controllable. A statue can't reject you, it can't say no, it's literally an object. So statues, as lifeless representations of the human form, form may serve as a safe target for unconscious sexual impulses. And if we bring in Lacan, things get more interesting. From a Lacanian perspective, this act can also be interpreted through the framework of the mirror stage. Lacan's mirror stage theory suggests that identity is formed in relation to the other, things outside ourselves that help us define who we are. So what if statues are a kind of safe other? Statues, as idealised yet silent representations of femininity, may function as an object over which men can assert absolute control. They represent women, but without the messy reality of actual human interaction. Groping a statue might be a way of performing dominance over an idealised, unresisting version of the female form. Unlike real women, statues do not challenge or resist, allowing these men to enact a form of dominance without consequence. This reinforces the patriarchal fantasy of women as submissive and available. But this is where Flora becomes really important. You know, these men didn't see her as an object. They claimed that they thought she was alive. And this argument suggests for them that the difference between a statue and a real woman didn't really matter. It was about opportunity and whether they'd get away with it. Alright, so we've talked about why some men might feel compelled to do this, but how does this behaviour spread? They didn't just pop out the womb and think, hey, I can grope statues. It doesn't quite work like that. The normalization of such behaviour can be understood through Albert Bandura's social learning theory, which suggests that people learn behaviours through observation and reinforcement. Bandura, who basically figured out that people learn behaviours by watching others, which just seems logical now, but maybe at the time wasn't that clear, would say that this trend exists because men see similar behaviour around them all the time. Media, advertising, even jokes around friends, all these things reinforce the idea that touching women without consent is funny, normal, and no big deal. If men see sexual harassment trivialised in films, advertisements, and online content, then they may come to view it as socially acceptable. Groping statues, therefore, may be an extension of this learned behaviour, a way to engage in sexually aggressive actions in a socially safe context where real-life consequences are unlikely. Connecting this back to Flora, the fact that these men thought that she was real but still felt comfortable touching her speaks to the power of learned behaviour. It suggests that they've been taught that this kind of action is acceptable, because in their minds the only problem was that she turned out to be a statue, not that they were groping someone in the first place. And then we get to social media, which loves this kind of thing. Talking to you, Andrew Tate. Some may argue that online trends can encourage performative masculinity, where men seek validation through the public display of dominance and disregard for social norms. A guy gropes a statue, takes a photo, posts it, and suddenly it's a joke. His friends laugh, maybe they copy him, they share the post, and before you know it, it's a full-blown trend. Connell and Messerschmitt's theory of hegemonic masculinity helps explain why this happens. They would argue that men are rewarded for behaviours that assert dominance over women, even in seemingly small ways. In online spaces, this manifests in challenges, pranks, and viral videos that normalise sexual aggression. The groping of statues, therefore, may be an example of this. A performative act meant to entertain peers and affirm masculine identity. Now, you might be thinking, why the hell is she ranting on about this? It may be inappropriate,
But it's not that deep.
it's just a statue. Well, here's why it is that deep. Although groping a statue may seem trivial, it has broader implications for gender relations and cultural values. This kind of behaviour normalises something bigger: rape culture. That's the term that feminist scholars use to describe how society downplays sexual violence, making it seem normal or even funny. If men can grope statues without it being called out, it reinforces the idea that this kind of thing isn't a big deal. And this carries over into real life. Bourdieu's idea of symbolic violence is relevant here again. It's these seemingly small, insignificant actions that contribute to a much bigger system of gender inequality. When such behaviours are ignored or dismissed, they become ingrained and embedded into social norms, making it harder to challenge more overt forms of sexism. And beyond that, if you don't care about feminist theory, you could probably understand that it's just simply disrespectful, not just to women, but to culture, to history, and public spaces in general. Some of these statues may be hundreds of years old. They're art, and vandalising them for a joke is not cool. It not only demonstrates a lack of respect for women, but also for cultural heritage and public space. And when men claim "I thought she was real" as an excuse, they're just admitting to sexual harassment. They're revealing how little society has challenged the idea that women's bodies are fair game. So where does that leave us? First off, we need to stop treating this as a harmless event, or a prank, or something to be laughed at. If it's a reflection of how society views women, then it plays into much larger problems. Feminist theory reveals how it reinforces the objectification of women and symbolic violence. Psychoanalysis suggests that unconscious desires and power fantasies are at play. And social learning theory explains how such behaviours are normalized through media and social influence. While it may seem like a minor issue, the implications extend far beyond public statues, reflecting and reinforcing harmful gender norms. Addressing this trend requires a cultural shift, greater awareness, stronger legal consequences, and a re-evaluation of how women are represented in public spaces. At the end of the day, this isn't just about statues. It's about the ways that we normalise sexism and how we teach people what's okay and the kind of world that we want to live in. By challenging the trivialization of such behaviours, society can hopefully step towards dismantling the broader structures of misogyny that enable them. If you found this interesting, give me a like and tell me what you think in the comments. Have you ever noticed this happening in public spaces? Have you seen it for yourself or on social media? And what do you think needs to change? Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you are new, subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this or other content around philosophy, media, etc. And with that, I'll see you soon.